My small act of defiance painting a garden gnome's hat red was supposed to be harmless. Instead, it triggered a chain of events that exposed my wife's secret past with a powerful network, transforming our quiet suburban home into a brutal battlefield. The Saturday morning sun felt perfect on my shoulders. It was the kind of morning that made you believe, just for a moment, that your little slice of suburban paradise was worth the ridiculous HOA fees. I was in my happy place, the front yard, a cold drink sweating on the patio table beside me, and my most prized possession in front of me, General Patton, my garden gnome. My mission today was simple, a small act of defiance. I was painting his pointy little hat a vibrant, unapologetic shade of crimson, not the HOA-approved subtle fawn or gentle taupe. Nope. This was rebellion in a can of spray paint. Our homeowners association was run by a woman named Brenda, a retired gym teacher with a visor permanently attached to her forehead and a clipboard that seemed surgically grafted to her hand. Brenda and her committee had managed to legislate every ounce of joy out of our neighborhood. Your grass couldn't be a quarter-inch too high. Your holiday decorations had to be taken down within 48 hours of the holiday itself. And most importantly, all lawn ornaments had to be chosen from an approved catalog, in an approved color palette that ranged from beige to slightly darker beige. My General Patton, a gift from my late father, was already on thin ice for not being from Lawn Ornaments and More. Painting his hat bright red was basically me declaring war. My wife, Anna, thought my little feud was hilarious. She'd kiss my cheek on her way out the door for her demanding job and say, "Don't let Brenda write you too many tickets today, honey." She didn't understand the tyranny. She was always so calm, so in control. Me, I let things get to me. And Brenda's endless stream of passive-aggressive notices slid under my door was getting to me. So today, General Patton was getting a promotion to 5-star general with a hat to match. I was just applying the second coat, humming to myself, when a pristine white sedan I'd never seen before pulled up to the curb. It wasn't a police car, but it had that same sterile, official look. The doors opened and 2 men got out. They were both large, with military-style crew cuts and cheap, dark sunglasses that hid their eyes. They wore matching navy blue polo shirts with a stitched logo over the breast, a golden eagle clutching a miniature gavel. Underneath, it read, HOA Enforcement Division. I almost laughed out loud. Enforcement Division. Since when did Brenda's knitting circle have a tactical unit? The taller one, whose name tag read Miller, walked towards me with a slow, deliberate swagger. The other one, Schmidt, was built like a refrigerator and stayed a few paces behind, arms crossed, just radiating intimidation. "Good morning, sir," Miller said, his voice flat and devoid of any actual morning goodness. "We've received a complaint regarding a violation of Bylaw 7, Section 4, unapproved aesthetic alterations to lawn fixtures." He said it like he was reading charges for a capital crime. I put my paintbrush down, a smirk playing on my lips. This was a new level of absurdity, even for Brenda. "You guys are kidding, right? It's a gnome. I'm painting my gnome." Miller didn't crack a smile. "This is not a joking matter, sir. You are in clear violation. We're going to have to ask you to cease and desist immediately and return the fixture to its pre-approved state." My smirk faded. The way he was standing, the rigid posture, the condescending tone, it was starting to feel less like a joke and more like a threat. "Look, Officer Miller," I said, putting air quotes around his title. "You're on my property. You have no authority here. This is a civil matter. If Brenda has a problem, she can send me another one of her little letters. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to get back to my unapproved aesthetic alteration." I picked up the paintbrush, a clear signal for them to get lost. That was my mistake. In a blur of motion, Schmidt closed the distance between us. His meaty hand clamped down on my wrist, squeezing with surprising force. He said, "Put it down," Schmidt grunted. The shock of it sent a jolt through me. "Hey, get your hands off me." I tried to pull my arm away, but his grip was like iron. Miller stepped closer, his face now a mask of smug authority. "Sir, you are now being non-compliant. This elevates the situation. Put the brush down and place your hands behind your back." "Behind my back? For painting a gnome? Have you lost your minds?" I yelled, trying to twist out of Schmidt's grasp. "This is assault." "On the contrary," Miller said smoothly. "This is enforcement. You're resisting. That's a serious violation." It happened so fast I didn't have time to process it. Schmidt wrenched my arm behind my back, and Miller shoved me forward. I lost my balance and tumbled onto the lawn, the scent of cut grass and wet paint filling my nostrils. Before I could even push myself up, Schmidt's knee was pressing hard into the small of my back, pinning me to the ground. Miller crouched beside my head, his cheap sunglasses reflecting my own stunned face. "You see? This is what happens when people like you think the rules don't apply to them," he sneered, his voice low and triumphant. "We're going to make sure everyone in this neighborhood understands the importance of compliance." My face was pressed into the dirt. Humiliation and rage burned in my chest. These two thugs, these fake cops, were doing this on my own front lawn over a garden gnome. I could hear a neighbor's sprinklers turn on, the sound mocking the utter absurdity of my situation. I was completely helpless, and then I heard a sound that cut through everything. It was the soft click of our front screen door opening, followed by a footstep on the porch. A calm, steady voice, a voice I knew better than my own, sliced through the air. It wasn't loud, but it carried in weight that made the birds stop chirping. "Gentlemen," she said, "I suggest you get off my husband. Now." Miller and Schmidt froze. The pressure on my back lessened slightly as Schmidt shifted his weight. I saw Miller's head snap up, his smug expression instantly replaced by confusion. He squinted towards the porch. I twisted my head, the grit of the lawn scraping my face, and saw what had frozen them in place. It was my wife, Anna, and she wasn't in her usual weekend sweats. She was standing on the porch in her full, crisp blue police detective's uniform, her badge gleaming in the morning sun, and her hand resting calmly on the holstered service weapon at her hip. The world seemed to slow down. Miller's jaw, which had been set in a smug line just moments before, went slack. Schmidt, the human refrigerator currently using my spine as a footrest, actually craned his neck to get a better look, his entire body tensing up. He'd clearly been trained to recognize a threat, and the woman standing on my porch in full uniform, hand resting casually on her sidearm, was radiating a level of authority his fake polo shirt could only dream of. For a solid 5 seconds, the only sound was the rhythmic hiss of my neighbor's sprinklers. It was Anna who broke the silence, her voice dropping a little lower, losing the polite suggestion and gaining a hard, professional edge. "I won't ask again." That was enough for Schmidt. The pressure vanished from my back as he scrambled to his feet, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. "Hey, easy now. No problem. Just a misunderstanding." Miller, however, seemed to think he could still salvage the situation. He straightened his polo shirt and tried to regain his swagger. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this is an official HOA matter. We are private contractors with a mandate to enforce community bylaws. This individual," he gestured down at me as if I were a piece of trash, "was resisting enforcement." I pushed myself up onto my elbows, my shirt stained with dirt and a smear of crimson paint. "Resisting? You thugs tackled me for painting a gnome?" Anna took a slow step off the porch, her boots making a soft thud on the grass. Her eyes never left Miller. "Is that what you call it? Resisting enforcement? Because from where I'm standing, it looked a lot like assault. It looked like unlawful restraint. And considering those neat little uniforms, it's bordering on impersonating an officer of the peace. Those are felonies. Are you familiar with the term felony, Mr. Miller?" Her voice was like ice. She knew his name. Of course she did. She'd heard me say it. But the way she used it, it sounded like an accusation, like something she was already writing in a report. Miller's composure finally started to crack. A bead of sweat trickled down from his crew cut. "Now hold on. We're not impersonating anyone. Our authority is derived from the covenants, conditions, and restrictions of the West Meadow Creek Homeowners Association." He was reciting from a script, his voice losing its confident baritone. Anna was now standing just a few feet from him, and the difference between them was palpable. He was playing dress-up. She was the real thing. "The CCNRs don't supersede state and federal law," she said, her tone dangerously calm. "So let's see it. Let's see your identification, both of you, and the legal documentation that gives you, specifically, the authority to physically restrain a homeowner on his own property." Schmidt was already fumbling for his wallet, looking like a schoolboy caught cheating. He seemed desperate for this to end. Miller, on the other hand, hesitated. He glanced at his car, then back at Anna, his mind clearly racing, trying to calculate an escape route. I saw the flicker of panic in his eyes, and a wave of satisfaction washed over me. Anna saw it too. "Don't even think about it," she said, her hand moving from a resting position to firmly gripping the butt of her pistol. She didn't draw it, but the message was unmistakable. The situation had now been upgraded from a simple conversation to a potential felony stop. Defeated, Miller slowly, deliberately, reached into his back pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He flipped it open, his movements stiff and angry. Schmidt practically threw his ID at Anna, a cheap, laminated card with his photo, and the same ridiculous HOA Enforcement Division logo. Anna gave it a cursory glance before her full attention landed on Miller. He extracted a similar card and held it out. "Here. Happy now?" he grumbled. Anna took the card from his hand, and that's when everything changed. I had gotten to my feet, my back aching, my mind still reeling from the whiplash of the morning. I was expecting Anna to scoff at the fake ID, maybe read them the riot act, and send them packing with a threat to call their boss, Brenda. But that's not what happened. Anna looked down at the ID in her hand, and her entire demeanor shifted. The professional, icy calm she had projected since stepping out the door just evaporated. Her eyes widened slightly, and I saw her take a sharp, almost imperceptible breath. The color drained from her face. She looked up from the card, her gaze locking onto Miller's, and the expression she wore was not one of a cop dealing with a couple of overzealous security guards. It was something else entirely. It was a look of dawning horror, of sudden, chilling recognition. She knew him, or she knew something about this ID that terrified her. The professional mask was gone, replaced by a flicker of genuine, raw fear. She then glanced over at me, her eyes wide and urgent, silently screaming a warning I couldn't possibly understand. And in that terrifying moment, I knew this had absolutely nothing to do with a garden gnome. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Miller seemed to notice the shift in Anna's demeanor, and a slow, ugly smile spread across his face. The fear was gone, replaced by the same smug confidence he'd had when he was pinning me to the ground. He had the upper hand again, and he knew it. "Well, well," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Looks like you finally understand the situation, detective." He said her title like it was a dirty word. Anna's hand, which had been so firmly on her weapon, now seemed frozen. Her knuckles were white. She took a step back, her eyes flicking from Miller's face to the laminated card in her hand, then back again. I had never seen her look like this. Not once in the decade we'd been together. Anna was the rock. She was the one who walked into chaos and calmly untangled it. To see her rattled, truly and deeply rattled, sent a spike of pure ice through my veins. "What's going on, Anna?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I took a step towards her, but she held up her other hand, a sharp, silent command for me to stay put. Her focus was entirely on Miller. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice tight, strained. It was the voice of someone negotiating from a place of weakness. Miller let out a short, humorless laugh. "What do I want? I want you to tell your husband to mind his own business. I want you to take that ridiculous little man," he sneered, gesturing at General Patton, "and toss him in the trash where he belongs. And then I want you to go back inside your house and forget you ever saw us." He took a deliberate step closer to her, invading her space. Schmidt, sensing the power shift, puffed out his chest and recrossed his arms, the intimidation back in full force. "This is insane," I blurted out, unable to stay silent any longer. "Anna, call it in. Call for backup. These guys assaulted me." Miller's head snapped towards me. "Your wife is smart enough to know that's a very bad idea," he said, his eyes cold and hard. "Isn't that right, detective? You wouldn't want to make things complicated." He was threatening her, openly, and she was letting him. She was just standing there, her face a pale mask of conflict. The name on the ID card, the logo, the whole HOA enforcement charade was all a key to something else, a secret I wasn't privy to, a past that had just walked up our driveway and tackled me over lawn decor. "Get in the house, Mark," Anna said without looking at me. Her voice was flat, an order. "What? No, I'm not leaving you out here with these creeps. Mark, go. Inside. Now." Each word was a sharpened point. The fear in her eyes was now mixed with a desperate plea. She was trying to protect me, not from them, but from whatever this was, whatever secret history they shared. Reluctantly, feeling completely useless, I started backing towards the porch. I felt Miller's smug gaze on me the entire time. I got to the door and stopped, my hand on the knob, unwilling to let her out of my sight. Anna slowly held out Miller's ID card. He snatched it from her fingers. "Good choice," he said. "We'll be monitoring the property. Make sure Bylaw 7 Section 4 is rectified by the end of the day. We wouldn't want to have to come back." With a final, lingering glare at Anna, he turned and walked back to the white sedan. Schmidt followed, casting a triumphant smirk in my direction before getting in the passenger side. The car started, pulled away from the curb with a quiet hum, and disappeared down the street. It was over as quickly as it had begun. The suburban morning was quiet again, except for the damn sprinklers. As soon as the car was out of sight, Anna's entire body sagged. She put a hand against the side of the house to steady herself, her shoulders trembling. I rushed over to her. "Anna! Honey, what the hell was that? Who were those guys?" She wouldn't look at me. She just stared at the spot where the car had been, her breathing ragged. "Anna, talk to me," I said, my voice rising in panic. I gently took her arm, and she flinched, pulling away from my touch. "Don't," she whispered. She finally turned to face me, and the look in her eyes gutted me. The fear was still there, but now it was layered with a profound shame. "Mark," she began, her voice cracking, "we have to move." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "Move? What are you talking about? Because of some HOA goons? We'll file a report, we'll sue them, we'll sue Brenda and the whole—" "No," she cut me off, her voice sharp with desperation. "No reports, no calls, no lawyers. You don't understand. They aren't from the HOA. I know that. So who are they? Why did you freeze up like that? What was on that ID?" I was practically pleading with her. I needed to understand how my world had just been turned upside down. She looked around our perfect little yard, at our perfect little house, the life we had built together. Her gaze was that of a prisoner on death row. "They're not here for the gnome, Mark," she said, her voice dropping to a terrified whisper. "They're here for me." My mind struggled to catch up. "Here for you? What does that even mean?" "Anna, you're a police detective. If someone is threatening you, that's what the entire force is for. We report them." I gestured wildly with my hands, my frustration boiling over. "This is what you do for a living." She shook her head, a single tear finally escaping and tracing a path down her pale cheek. "You can't report them. There's no one to report them to. It's not a threat, Mark. It's a summons." She wrapped her arms around herself, a futile attempt to hold herself together. "I need you to listen to me, very carefully. We don't have a lot of time." She led me inside, shutting the front door and locking the deadbolt with a decisive click that sounded like a prison door slamming shut. The living room, usually a bright and welcoming space, suddenly felt like a cage. My half-painted general pattern, visible through the window, stood as a ridiculous monument to how naive I had been just 10 minutes earlier. Anna began pacing, her police boots leaving faint scuffs on the hardwood floor. "Years ago," she started, her voice low and strained. "Before I became a detective, before I even met you, I worked for a different kind of organization. It wasn't exactly government, it was private. Very private. We handled situations that couldn't be handled through official channels." My blood ran cold. I'd always known there were parts of her past she didn't talk about. She'd been vague about her early 20s, mentioning some security consulting work, but I'd always assumed it was boring corporate stuff. I never pressed. Now the blank spaces in her history were being filled in with something dark and terrifying. "What kind of situations?" I asked, my voice hoarse. She stopped pacing and looked me straight in the eye. The shame was gone, replaced by a grim resignation. "We cleaned up messes for powerful people. Financial irregularities, political embarrassments, personal indiscretions. We were ghosts. We went in, fix the problem, and disappeared. The organization had one rule that was absolute. When you leave, you leave. You don't talk, you don't keep records, you become a civilian, and you never look back. Breaking that rule is not an option. The pieces started to click into place, each one more horrifying than the last. Miller and Schmidt, I said, the names tasting like poison. They're from this organization? She nodded. They're retrieval specialists. They find people who have broken the rule. The HOA Enforcement Division, she let out a bitter, humorless laugh, is just one of their covers. It's brilliant, really. It gives them a plausible reason to be anywhere, to observe people, to test them. It's a way to knock on the door without raising any red flags. But you didn't break the rule, I insisted, my heart pounding. You've never said a word about this to anyone, not even to me. I know, she whispered, her gaze dropping to the floor, but someone else must have. Someone from a case I worked on years ago. They must have talked, and the information led back to me. To them, it doesn't matter if I'm the source of the leak or just a loose end that needs to be tied up. The protocol is the same for both. She walked over to the fireplace and pried a loose brick from the hearth, a hiding place I never knew existed. From inside, she pulled out a small, heavy canvas bag. She unzipped it and dumped the contents onto the coffee table. Several thick wads of cash, 3 different passports with her picture but different names, and a small, sleek burner phone. Seeing it all laid out, this secret escape plan, made it terrifyingly real. My wife, the woman I shared a bed with, had a go-bag packed and ready for a life I never knew she had. This is our only chance, she said, her voice regaining some of its professional composure. She was slipping back into the role she was trained for, the one she had tried to leave behind. They gave me until the end of the day. That wasn't a threat about the gnome. It was a deadline. They'll be watching the house. If we try to call the police, if we make any move that looks like we're fighting back, they'll escalate. We have to be gone before they come back to rectify the violation. She started stuffing the cash and passports into her pockets. Go upstairs. Pack a small bag. Only essentials. Toothbrush. Change of clothes. Nothing sentimental. Nothing that can be traced. We have maybe an hour if we're lucky. An hour? An hour to abandon our home, our lives, everything we had built, because of some shadowy organization from my wife's secret past. My mind was spinning, a chaotic mess of fear and confusion. But looking at her face, at the grim certainty in her eyes, I knew she wasn't being paranoid. This was real. I nodded numbly and headed for the stairs. As my foot hit the first step, a thought struck me, cold and sharp. Anna, I said, turning back to her. How do they tie up loose ends? What happens to people they retrieve? Anna paused, her back to me. She stood perfectly still for a long moment. When she finally turned around, the look on her face was one of absolute desolation. You don't want to know, Mark, she said softly. But I do. I need to know what we're running from. She closed her eyes, and her voice was barely audible when she finally answered. They have a place, an unofficial facility. No windows, no records. People go in. They don't come out. Ever. A sudden, loud buzz from the coffee table made us both jump. The burner phone, which had been sitting dormant, was vibrating, its screen lit up with an incoming call from a blocked number. Anna stared at it, her face turning ashen. That's impossible, she whispered, her voice trembling. No one has this number. The buzzing of the burner phone seemed to fill the entire house, an electric, insistent shriek that cut through the fragile shell of our suburban quiet. Anna stared at it like it was a venomous snake coiled on our coffee table. Her meticulously crafted escape plan, her secret lifeline, had just been compromised. Who could it be? I whispered, as if speaking any louder would make the situation worse. She shook her head, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief. No one, absolutely no one, she repeated. This phone has never been turned on. The number isn't connected to any network until the first outgoing call is made. It's a ghost. It shouldn't be able to receive a call. The phone continued its relentless buzzing. The block number on the screen seemed to mock us, a digital specter that had breached her impenetrable defenses. This wasn't just a complication, it was a fundamental violation of the rules of her old world. It meant they were deeper inside her life than she had ever imagined. What do we do? I asked, my voice shaking. We don't answer it, she said, her voice a low, urgent command. We stick to the plan. We grab the bags and we go. Now! She moved to scoop the phone and the other items off the table, but the buzzing stopped. The screen went dark. For a moment we were suspended in a silent vacuum of dread. Then, a new sound. A soft chime. A text message. Anna hesitated for a fraction of a second before her training took over. She snatched the phone, her thumb hovering over the screen. She knew it was a trap. She knew she shouldn't look. But the need to know, to understand the nature of the threat, was too strong. She opened the message. I watched her face as she read it, saw the last vestiges of hope drain away, replaced by a stark, cold certainty. Her hand started to tremble, and she held the phone out for me to see. It wasn't a long message, just a single, chilling sentence. The crimson on the gnome's hat is a lovely shade, isn't it? We're watching. Don't run. My stomach turned to ice. They weren't just watching the house. They were watching us, right now. They had seen me painting the gnome. They had seen Anna come out in her uniform. They had seen her grab the go-bag. They knew about the burner phone. They weren't just a step ahead of us. They were living inside our pockets. The deadline of end of day was a lie. A game. They were toying with us. Anna sank onto the edge of the sofa, the phone clattering from her hand onto a cushion. All the fight seemed to go out of her. The hardened professional I had seen emerge just moments before was gone, replaced by my wife, looking small and terrified. "They've been here for a while," she whispered, her voice hollow. "This wasn't a random check-in. This was planned. They knew." "How?" I asked, my mind racing. "How could they know all this?" She looked around our living room, at the photos on the mantel, the books on the shelves, the life we had so carefully built. There must be a mole inside the department, someone who knew my old background, someone who's been feeding them information, my posting here, my address, my routines. "You." Her eyes met mine, filled with a fresh wave of horror. "Oh God, Mark, they know about you. You're part of my new life, your leverage." The word hung in the air between us, ugly and sharp. All this time I thought I was a bystander caught in the crossfire of her past. I wasn't. I was the target. The gnome wasn't the violation. I was. My existence was the loose end they wanted to tie up. A new kind of anger, cold and hard, began to solidify in my chest, pushing past the fear. They had threatened my wife. They had invaded my home. They had turned my entire life into a variable in their sick equation. "No," I said, my voice firm. "We're not running. And we're not surrendering." Anna looked up at me, her expression lost. "What other choice do we have? We can't fight them. You don't know what they're capable of." "And you don't know what I'm capable of," I shot back, a fire I didn't know I possessed igniting within me. "This is my home. You are my wife. I'm not going to let some ghosts in polo shirts take that away from us." I started pacing, the adrenaline sharpening my thoughts. "They're playing a game with us, right? They're trying to scare us, to make us predictable. So let's stop playing their game." I looked at the burner phone, then at Anna's official police-issued cell phone sitting on the end table. An idea, insane and reckless, began to form in my mind. They expect us to run or to hide. They expect you to fall back on your old training, but they don't know me. They think I'm just some suburban husband, some soft target. Let's use that. I picked up her police phone. "Who is the one person in your department you trust?" "Absolutely. 100%. Without a doubt." Anna looked at me, confused. "My old partner, Detective Miller. Dave Miller, not the other one. Why?" "Because we're going to make a call," I said, my resolve hardening. "But not the one they're expecting. I found Dave's number in her contacts. We're not going to report a threat against a police officer. That would go through official channels, trip every wire. We're going to report something else, something that will bring every cop in a 20-mile radius here with sirens blazing. No questions asked." I took a deep breath. "We're going to report a hostage situation. At our address. Right now." Anna's eyes widened in comprehension, and a spark of the old, defiant Anna returned. It was a crazy gamble. It would blow our lives apart, create a media circus, and put her career in jeopardy. But it was also the one thing our tormentors wouldn't see coming. It was a move of pure, unpredictable chaos. I pressed the call button. As the phone began to ring, a new message popped up on the screen of the burner phone lying on the cushion. Anna saw it at the same time I did. My blood froze. It was a photograph. A live photo, clearly taken just moments ago from somewhere outside. It showed the back of our house, and standing at our sliding glass door peering inside was the hulking silhouette of Schmidt. The message below the picture was simple. Too late. The world compressed into a single, heart-stopping image on the tiny screen. Schmidt. Not in a car down the street, not watching from a distance, but right there. His massive frame filled the glass of our patio door, a dark predator who had already breached our defenses. The too late wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. My grand, chaotic plan to call in the cavalry evaporated into a puff of stupid, arrogant smoke. They hadn't been waiting for us to make a move. They were already in position. The phone in my hand, still ringing Dave Miller's number, suddenly felt like a useless brick. I slammed my thumb down, ending the call before it could connect. We were caught. "The back door," Anna breathed, her voice a ghost of a sound. She was already moving, her body shifting from terrified spouse back into tactical operator. The fear was still there, etched on her face, but it was now fuel for a cold, focused engine. "It's a weak point, standard lock. I always meant to install a better one." A pang of guilt hit me, that had been on my to-do list for months. While I was busy painting gnomes in defiance of Brenda, a real monster had been casing my house. Anna grabbed the heaviest thing she could find, a cast-iron fireplace poker, and flattened herself against the wall, next to the archway leading to the kitchen. Her eyes darted around the room, assessing every shadow, every angle. "Mark," she commanded, her voice low and sharp. "The stairs. Now. Get upstairs. Lock yourself in the master bathroom. Barricade the door. Do not come out, no matter what you hear. Do you understand me?" "No," I hissed back, grabbing a heavy glass vase from a side table. It was a pathetic weapon, but it was something. "I'm not leaving you down here alone." "You'll be in my way," she shot back, her professional mask cracking with a sliver of desperation. "I can't protect you and fight him at the same time. Please, Mark. For once, just do what I say." Her plea was raw, stripped of all authority, and filled with the sheer terror of losing me. It hit me harder than any command. She wasn't trying to sideline me. She was trying to save me. From the kitchen, a faint sound, the soft scrape of a tool against the lock of the sliding door. He was being quiet, methodical. He wasn't kicking the door in. He was trying to get inside without making a scene. That was somehow more terrifying. It meant he was confident, unhurried. It meant Miller was probably covering the front. We were boxed in. I gave Anna a final, agonized look, then nodded. I backed away towards the stairs, my eyes locked on the kitchen archway, the useless vase held in a white-knuckled grip. I took the stairs two at a time, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it would break. I didn't run to the master bathroom. I ran to our bedroom, to the nightstand on Anna's side of the bed, her off-duty weapon. I fumbled with the drawer, my hands slick with sweat. I knew the combination to the small safe inside. She had insisted I memorize it for emergencies. I guess this qualified. The lock clicked open. My fingers closed around the cold, heavy steel of her backup pistol. I had been to the range with her a few times, but I was no expert. Still, holding it felt infinitely better than holding a piece of decorative glass. As I chambered around the sound deafeningly loud in the silent house, I heard a soft click from downstairs. The back door. He was in. A floorboard creaked in the kitchen. My blood turned to ice. I couldn't just hide. I couldn't cower in a bathroom while my wife faced that mountain of a man with a fireplace poker. I crept out of the bedroom, the gun held in a shaky, two-handed grip, just like she'd taught me. I moved to the top of the stairs, my body pressed against the wall, peering down into the foyer. I could see the archway to the kitchen. Nothing. The house was deathly quiet. Too quiet. Where was he? Where was Anna? Suddenly, a blur of motion. Anna lunged out from her hiding spot, swinging the poker in a vicious arc aimed at where Schmidt's head should have been. But he wasn't there. He'd anticipated her. He stepped out from the other side of the archway, a cruel smile on his face. He had feinted, drawing her out. The poker whistled through empty air, its momentum throwing Anna slightly off balance. It was all the opening he needed. He moved with a speed that was shocking for a man his size. He didn't try to grab the poker, instead he lunged forward, his shoulder crashing into hers. Anna cried out in pain, stumbling back, slamming hard against the wall. The poker clattered to the floor. Schmidt was on her in an instant, one massive hand grabbing her by the throat and lifting her off her feet, pinning her against the wall. Her legs dangled uselessly, kicking at the air. Her hands clawed at his wrist, but it was like trying to break a steel cable. "See? This is what happens when you leave the family," Schmidt grunted, his face inches from hers. "You get soft. You get a house, a husband. You forget who you are." He squeezed, and Anna's face began to turn a dusky purple. Rage, pure and white-hot, flooded my senses, overriding all fear. I raised the pistol, my hand surprisingly steady now. I had a clear shot at his back, a target bigger than any I'd ever aimed for at the range. I lined up the sights. "Get your hands off my wife," I roared, my voice cracking with a mixture of terror and fury. Schmidt froze. His head slowly turned, and he looked up the stairs, his eyes locking onto me. He didn't look surprised. He didn't even look concerned. His smile just widened. "The husband," he said, his voice a low rumble. "With a gun. How cute." He still had Anna pinned to the wall, her life literally in his hand. He looked from me to her, then back again. "You're not going to shoot," he said, his voice oozing with a chilling certainty. "You might hit her. You don't have the nerve." He was right. My hands were shaking again. He was using her as a shield. I was useless. "But you know who does have the nerve?" Schmidt said, his smile turning predatory. As he spoke, I heard a sound behind me, the soft click of the master bedroom door opening. I spun around, my heart seizing in my chest, and found myself staring down the barrel of a pistol held by the other man. Miller. He had been in the house the whole time. The world narrowed to the dark, circular void at the end of Miller's pistol. He stood in the doorway of our bedroom, not 10 feet away, a vision of calm, lethal control. The cheap sunglasses were gone, and his eyes were flat and gray, like river stones. He held his weapon with the casual ease of a man who had done this 1,000 times before. My mind, which had been screaming with adrenaline just a second ago, went completely silent. Every tactical disadvantage crashed down on me at once. I was at the top of a staircase, a classic fatal funnel. I had an enemy in front of me, and an enemy behind and below me. I was an amateur, holding a gun I barely knew how to use, caught between two professionals. "Drop it," Miller said. His voice wasn't a shout. It was a simple, non-negotiable statement. "Put it on the floor. Now." Downstairs I heard a choked gasp. Schmidt was still holding Anna against the wall, her struggles growing weaker. He was watching the show, enjoying every second of my terror. My choice was simple and impossible: obey Miller and doom us all, or try something stupid and get myself shot, leaving Anna to face them alone. My hands trembled, the weight of the pistol suddenly feeling immense. I couldn't shoot Miller. His aim was too steady. I couldn't shoot Schmidt. I might hit Anna. I was completely and utterly trapped. I said, "Drop it!" Miller's voice sharpened, taking a step forward out of the doorway. I saw his trigger finger tighten. My survival instinct screamed at me to obey, to throw the gun down, to beg for my life. But then I saw Anna's face. Even while being choked, her eyes were locked on me, and they weren't pleading for me to save her. They were pleading for me to survive. That look, that final, desperate message broke through my fear. I wasn't going to die, cowering. With a guttural yell, I did the stupidest, most unpredictable thing I could think of. I threw myself sideways, off the top of the stairs. For a split second, I was airborne. The world tilted crazily. A gunshot, deafeningly loud in the enclosed space, exploded behind me. I felt a searing, white-hot pain rip through my left shoulder as I crashed onto the staircase halfway down. I tumbled, my body a clumsy mess of flailing limbs, hitting every step on the way down with bone-jarring force. The gun flew from my grasp, skittering across the hardwood floor of the foyer. I landed in a heap at the bottom, a wave of agony washing over me. My shoulder was on fire, but I was alive. And more importantly, I was no longer in Miller's line of sight. The chaos of my suicidal dive had created an opening. Schmidt, startled by the gunshot and my sudden appearance at his feet, loosened his grip on Anna for a fraction of a second. It was all she needed. With a desperate gasp of air, Anna brought her knee up hard into his groin. Schmidt let out a pained, guttural roar and doubled over, his hands instinctively going to the source of the pain. He dropped Anna, who collapsed to the floor, gasping and coughing, her throat bruised and raw. My insane gamble had worked. It had changed the dynamic, but we were far from safe. Miller was already pounding down the stairs, shouting, "Schmidt, get the wife! I've got him!" I tried to push myself up, but my left arm was useless, a dead weight of pure pain. Schmidt was recovering quickly, his face contorted in a mask of pure rage. He ignored me and lunged for Anna, who was still on the floor trying to get her breath back. I scrambled for the gun I had dropped, my fingers stretching, just inches from the grip. At the same time I saw Miller reach the bottom of the stairs, raising his pistol, aiming it directly at my head. This was it. There was no escape. Schmidt was about to grab Anna, and Miller was about to finish me. And then our front door splintered into 1,000 pieces. The entire door frame exploded inward in a shower of wood and drywall as a battering ram smashed through it. Before anyone could react, two figures in full tactical gear, clad in black from head to toe and faces obscured by helmets and gas masks, stormed into the foyer. They moved with fluid, terrifying efficiency. "Police! Drop your weapons!" one of them bellowed, his voice distorted and metallic through his mask. But it wasn't the police. I knew that instantly. The uniforms were wrong, no markings, no badges, and they moved with a kind of brutal precision that was different from any SWAT team I'd ever seen on TV. Miller, caught completely by surprise, spun around to face the new threat. He had a split-second decision to make: shoot me or engage the intruders. He chose them. He fired 2 quick shots at the first tactical figure. The bullet sparked against the man's body armor, having no effect. In response, the figure raised his weapon, not a pistol, but a compact military-style rifle, and fired a single, controlled shot. The sound was different, a sharp, suppressed thump. Miller jerked backward, a small dark hole appearing in the center of his chest. He staggered, a look of utter shock on his face before collapsing to the floor. It happened in the span of 2 seconds. The second tactical figure swept the room, his weapon trained on Schmidt, who had frozen in place, his hands raised in surrender. "On your knees, now!" the masked man yelled. Schmidt, his face pale with a new kind of fear, immediately complied, dropping to his knees and putting his hands on his head. This wasn't the police. This wasn't a rescue. This was an execution. This was an entirely different and far more dangerous player entering the game. The first figure, the one who had shot Miller, stepped over his body and pointed his rifle at Schmidt's head. And then he turned and looked directly at me, his weapon slowly lowering until it was pointed right at my face. Through the dark visor of his helmet, I felt his cold, analytical gaze. He tilted his head slightly, as if studying a curious insect. And from behind the mask, a distorted electronic voice spoke, not to the criminals, but directly to my wife. "Hello, Anna. The board sends its regards. Your probationary period is over." The distorted voice hung in the air, thick with a menace that dwarfed anything Miller and Schmidt had represented. They were just employees. This was management. Anna, still on the floor, looked up at the masked figure, and a look of pure, soul-deep dread crossed her face. This was what she had truly been afraid of. Not the retrieval team, but the people who had sent them. "The board," she whispered, the words catching in her throat. The figure who had addressed her, clearly the team leader, kept his weapon trained on me, his posture relaxed, utterly confident. The other masked man held his position on Schmidt, who was now trembling, no longer a predator, but prey. "Probationary period," I grunted, the pain in my shoulder a roaring fire. "What the hell are you talking about?" The leader's helmeted head swiveled slowly back to Anna. "Your departure was unsanctioned, Agent 7, the electronic voice droned. But your skills were deemed too valuable to simply retire. We've been observing your new life, assessing your attachments, your husband's..." Spirited defense was the final data point we required. He demonstrates loyalty, a useful trait. He was talking about me like I was a lab rat that had successfully navigated a maze. The entire HOA charade, the confrontation, my desperate dive down the stairs, it was all a test. A horrific, violent job interview, and apparently I had passed. "What do you want?" Anna asked, pushing herself into a sitting position, her eyes never leaving the leader. "Reinstatement," the voice said flatly. "A new operation is commencing. Your specific skill set is required. Your former partner, Agent 12, created a significant liability before his termination." He gestured with his rifle towards Miller's body. "You will clean up his mess, and your husband will be your civilian handler. His official cover will be a consultant for the parent corporation. It's all very neat." I stared at him, my mind reeling. Civilian handler? Parent corporation? This was insane. They weren't here to execute us. They were here to recruit us. "No," Anna said, her voice shaking but firm. "I'm out. We're out. I won't do it." The leader let out a sound that might have been a chuckle, a distorted burst of static. "That is not an option. You see, the previous retrieval protocol has been deemed inefficient. Too many loose ends." He nodded to his partner. The second masked man raised his rifle and without a word fired 2 suppressed shots into the back of Schmidt's head. Schmidt collapsed forward onto the floor without a sound. It was a cold, passionless act of housekeeping. My stomach heaved. This was the reality of Anna's old life. Not just threats and intimidation, but brutal, instantaneous death for failing. "The new protocol is integration," the leader continued, as if he had just swatted a fly. "Your attachment to your husband is no longer a liability to be threatened. He is an asset to be utilized. You will work for us together, and in return, he gets to live. And you get to keep this life you seem to enjoy so much. Refusal is not an option, because we are your only protection from the liability Agent 12 created. You will find that the people he angered are far less surgical than we are." It was a perfect trap, an offer we couldn't refuse, wrapped around a threat we couldn't ignore. They were offering us a prison disguised as a promotion. I looked at Anna, and I saw the fight drain out of her. She was trapped by her past, and now I was trapped with her. But as I looked at the masked man, at the body of Schmidt, at the blood pooling on our hardwood floor, something inside me shifted. The cold anger I had felt earlier returned, but this time it wasn't hot and reckless. It was icy cold. These people, this board, thought they could just walk into our lives, murder people in our home, and dictate our future. They thought because they held all the power, they had already won. "Okay," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. The leader's helmet tilted towards me again. "He speaks for you now?" the voice asked Anna. "Yes," I answered before she could. "He does." I slowly, painfully, got to my feet, clutching my bleeding shoulder. "We'll do it. On one condition." The leader was silent for a moment. "We don't negotiate." "You do today," I said, meeting his blank visor with a steady gaze. "You came into my house. You put my wife and me through hell. You shot me. You just murdered 2 men on my floor. You want our compliance? You want our loyalty? You're going to have to earn it. My condition is this. Brenda gets fired." The silence in the room was absolute. Even Anna stared at me like I had lost my mind. The second masked man actually shifted his stance, as if unsure of what he was hearing. The leader stood perfectly still. Then the static-laced chuckle returned, louder this time. "Brenda?" "The head of the HOA, I said, my voice gaining strength. "She was your pawn. She sicked those 2 goons on us. She's a petty tyrant who enjoys making people miserable. Your whole test gave her power over my family. You want me to be a civilian handler. My first official act is handling that. I want her gone. Fired, disgraced, forced to move, I don't care. I want her stripped of her clipboard and her power permanently. You can create international incidents, you can fake entire companies, you can certainly handle one suburban busybody. That's my price for playing along." It was the most absurd, most insane bluff of my life. I was negotiating the fate of my HOA president with a Black Ops killer, while standing in a puddle of my own blood. For a long moment that stretched into an eternity, the leader just stood there. I could almost feel him analyzing me, calculating. He was weighing the sheer, unadulterated gall of my demand against the cost of refusing. Finally, he gave a short, sharp nod. "Consider it handled," the electronic voice said. "A cleanup crew is 2 minutes out. They will handle the bodies and repair your door. They will provide medical attention for your shoulder. You'll receive your first briefing tomorrow. Welcome to the program, Mr. and Mrs. Smith." And just like that, he and his partner turned and walked out of the gaping hole where our front door used to be, vanishing into the quiet suburban morning. A week later, my arm was in a sling, our new front door was painted subtle fawn, and a moving truck was parked in front of Brenda's house. I stood in my yard sipping a coffee and watched as she directed the movers with frantic, angry gestures. The entire neighborhood was out, whispering. The official story was that the HOA's national parent company had audited her branch and found gross financial misconduct. Her reign was over. As she saw me watching, she gave me a look of pure, undiluted hatred. I just smiled and took a sip of my coffee. Beside me, General Patton stood proudly, his crimson hat gleaming in the sun, a tiny, defiant monument to the day our lives were ripped apart and stitched back together into something new, something dangerous. Anna came out and stood beside me, slipping her hand into mine. Her touch was warm, steady. "You're crazy, you know that?" she whispered, a small smile playing on her lips. "They had us, and you negotiated for a garden gnome." "No," I said, squeezing her hand. "I wasn't negotiating for the gnome. I was negotiating for us. I was letting them know who they're dealing with now." We stood there together, watching the last remnants of our old quiet life get hauled away in a truck. It was gone forever, but as I looked at my wife, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together. And that was a victory in itself.